Combat Specialist Thyrex Cax kept his whiskers still and his posture rigid as another human civilian approached his checkpoint. He could see the familiar gleam in her eyes, that same look they all got when they spotted a HEF in military armor. His paw tightened almost imperceptibly on his pulse rifle. "Oh my goodness, you're just the most adorable little." "This is a restricted military checkpoint," Madam Cax interrupted, his translator rendering his chittering into crisp standard English. "Please present your credentials or return to the civilian sector." The human's hand had been reaching toward his head. They always wanted to pet. Always. 3 generations of his family had served in the Colonial Defense Force, and still, the humans couldn't seem to separate their response to his species' evolutionary adaptations: the fur, the large eyes, the compact size, from their assessment of their capabilities as soldiers. Before the human could respond, Cax's sensitive foot pads detected an irregular vibration through the permacrete. He held up a paw, all attention now focused on the sensation. The human, surprisingly, noticed his change in demeanor and stepped back. "Command, checkpoint 3, he subvocalized into his comm. "Possible seismic activity, reading through the..." The second tremor hit harder. Much harder. Even the human felt it this time. Throughout the colony, Cax could hear the distinctive high-pitched alertness chirps of his people, an instinctive response from their burrowing ancestors. "All units, full alert," Commander Vela Nax's voice cut through the comm static. "Seismic activity detected across all sectors. This is not matching any known pattern for this region." Cax's combat training kicked in. "Madam," he addressed the human civilian, all patience gone from his voice, "evacuate to emergency shelter Delta immediately. Follow the illuminated path markers." He keyed his external speaker to maximum. "All civilians clear the area. This is not a drill." The ground heaved. Cax's sensitive pads picked up something else now, a rhythm to the vibrations. Not random, not natural, almost like ... footsteps, but that would require something impossibly large. The first fissures appeared in the street 3 blocks from his position. Not simple cracks, the permacrete was being pushed upward from below. Something vast and metallic breached the surface like a leviathan breaking through ocean waves. Cax's fur stood on end as his suit's sensors screamed warnings about electromagnetic interference. A hand. A giant, metallic hand bigger than the colony's main administrative building pushed through the broken ground. Soil and rock cascaded from ancient joints as fingers the size of transport vessels flexed for what might have been the first time in millennia. The civilian behind him started screaming. Cax couldn't blame her. His own threat response was triggering hard, ancestral instincts demanding he find a burrow, dig deep, hide from the massive predator. He fought it down. He was Colonial Defense Force. He was professional. "Command, checkpoint 3, he said, proud that his voice remained steady. "We have emergence. I repeat, we have emergence. Behemoth-class entity surfacing in Sector 7. The rest of the ancient machine continued its rise from the Earth, shoulders wider than city blocks. A torso that blocked out the sun. The head, if you could call it that, was a complex array of sensors and weapon mounts that his suit couldn't even begin to classify. The human garrison's response was immediate. Sirens blared across the colony as defense shields snapped into place. Cax watched as human dropships began deploying with practiced precision. They'd trained for this. They'd expected this. All HEF Defense Force units. Commander Nax's voice cut through the chaos. Integrate with human response teams as per Protocol 7. They've been preparing for these machines longer than we've known them. Follow their lead, but remember we are soldiers of the HEF, not their pets. Show them why our people are warriors to be respected. The behemoth stood fully now, ancient joints creaking as systems dormant for thousands of years came online. Cax readied his weapon, knowing it would be useless against something of that scale. But he stood his ground. The humans weren't running. Neither would he. That's when he saw her Sergeant Reyes of the Human Expeditionary Force, running toward his position with a team of heavily armed troops. There was no trace of the usual human condescension in his expression. Just professional focus and what looked like grim satisfaction. "Combat Specialist Cax," he called out. "Good. We're going to need your people's skills. That thing might be big, but we've learned a few things about taking them down. Ready to show these ancient machines why they shouldn't have napped through humanity's rise to the stars." Cax chittered an affirmative, falling in with the human squad. Behind them, the Behemoth took its first thundering step in 1,000 years, and the real battle for colony deep reach began. The ground trembled with each step of the Behemoth as Sergeant Reyes led their mixed squad through the evacuation routes. Cax found himself studying the humans' movements precise, purposeful, without any signs of panic. They seemed almost eager. Alpha Team, deploy Titan-class barricades at Junction 14. Reyes ordered into his comm. Beta and Charlie, get those civilian stragglers to the bunkers. Watch for falling debris, he turned to Cax. Your people can feel the vibrations better than our sensors. What's its movement pattern telling you? Cax pressed his pads firmly against the ground, filtering out the chaos of evacuating civilians and focusing on the rhythmic tremors. It's systematic, grid pattern, like it's searching. Good catch, Reyes nodded, his usual human tendency to treat HF like pets notably absent in the field. That matches the behavior patterns we documented on Titan when we found the dormant ones in the methane lakes. They're always looking for something specific when they wake up. We just haven't figured out what yet. A massive shadow passed overhead as the Behemoth moved between them and the system's primary star. Cax's squad instinctively huddled closer together, an old species memory of burrowing for safety, but they held their positions. Through his helmet's adaptive visor, he watched human dropships swarming around the ancient machine like angry insects, except these insects were deploying precision-guided munitions at specific points on the giant's armor. Your people knew these things existed, Cax asked as they reached their designated command post. For how long? Reyes began deploying holographic tactical displays. Found the first one on Mars back when we were still earthbound. Completely inactive, half buried in the Vals Marinaris. It scared the hell out of us, but it also kicked our weapons development into overdrive. Good thing too, we found them on 17 different worlds since then. Always dormant. Until now. The command post came alive with activity as both human and HF personnel coordinated the defense. Cax noticed something striking: the humans were integrating HF soldiers into their response teams based purely on capability assessments, with none of the usual social awkwardness that plagued civilian interactions. A deafening screech of metal filled the air as the Behemoth activated what appeared to be some kind of energy weapon. A section of the colony's shield grid overloaded, atmospheric generators straining to compensate. There's the weapons test, Reyes said, unsurprised. They always try the same sequence. Watch for the secondary emission building, called out a HF sensor specialist, Lieutenant Mira Kex. Her fur was standing on end from the electromagnetic interference, but her voice remained steady. Good call, Lieutenant Reyes acknowledged. All units, deploy electromagnetic countermeasures, pattern Sigma 7. Cax watched in amazement as human defense platforms rose from camouflage bunkers throughout the colony. They'd been preparing this defense for years, right under the civilian population's nose. The platforms launched synchronized bursts of energy that formed a complicated interference pattern around the Behemoth's weapon ports. You've been preparing our colonies for this, Cax asked, a mix of gratitude and indignation in his voice, without telling our government. Reyes's expression was grim. We tried. Your civilian leadership was resistant to the idea that these things existed, said we were being paranoid. Behind the scenes, though, your military commanders authorized us to set up basic defenses. They understood the threat. The Behemoth's weapon discharged again, but this time the energy dispersed harmlessly across the interference field. The ancient machine paused, as if puzzled by the resistance. Ha! A human tactical officer shouted. Bet they didn't expect anybody to remember the countermeasures. These things have been sleeping too long. Commander Vela Nax's voice cut through the command channel. All units, the evacuation is 60% complete. We need to keep this thing occupied for another 40 minutes minimum. Reyes turned to Cax, and he recognized the look in his eyes the one humans got when they were about to suggest something either brilliant or insane. Combat specialist, how do you feel about climbing? Climbing? Cax's ear tufts twitched in confusion. Those joints in its armor, she pointed to specific spots on the tactical display. They're maintenance access points. We found them on the dormant ones. Most humans are too large to exploit them effectively, but a HF squad. She trailed off meaningfully. Cax studied the tactical display, his military training warring with his species' instinct to avoid massive predators. You want us to infiltrate that thing? While it's active. Your people are natural climbers, have better tactile sensitivity than our best sensors, and can fit through spaces we can't, Reyes said. We'll provide you with specialized gear and heavy weapons support, but only if you volunteer. This isn't an order. Around them, the battle for Colony Deepreach continued. Human dropships and defense platforms kept the Behemoth distracted, but they all knew it was only a matter of time before the ancient machine adapted its strategies. Cax looked at his squad, saw the same mix of fear and determination in their postures. Then he looked back at Reyes and saw something he'd never expected to see in a human's eyes when looking at a HFY, genuine professional respect. "We'll do it," he said firmly. "But we're going to need a detailed briefing on what we might find inside that thing. And none of that brave little soldier's talk we usually get from your kind." Reyes's smile was fierce. "Combat specialist, the only thing little about what you're about to do is the size of the access points you'll be using. Let's go kill a giant." As they moved to the briefing area, Cax reflected that perhaps it took an ancient machine god rising from the ground to finally make humans see past their patronizing instincts. He just hoped they all lived long enough to build on this newfound respect. The briefing had to be conducted on the move as the Behemoth's attacks grew more precise. Cax's squad followed Reyes through Colony Deepreach's emergency burrow network, while holographic schematics danced in their helmet displays. The tunnels, built to HFY specifications, meant Reyes had to crouch as they moved. The biggest challenge isn't getting in, Reyes explained as another impact shook soil from the tunnel ceiling. It's staying alive once. Clear this section, a sharp chittering cut through their comms. All military personnel topside. Through his pads, Cax felt the distinct vibration pattern of a burrow collapse in Sector 7. The Behemoth was systematically destroying their colony's underground infrastructure, targeting the very heart of HFY civilization. "It knows our weaknesses," Commander Vela Nax's voice carried grim recognition. "These machines have encountered our kind before." They emerged from the tunnels at a forward operating post, where human technical crews worked alongside HFY engineers, prepping what looked like modified climbing gear. Lieutenant Mira Kex was already there, her sensor suite giving real-time updates on the Behemoth's electromagnetic emissions. "Energy patterns are stabilizing," she reported, whiskers twitching from the interference. "It's optimizing its weapons. We have maybe 20 minutes before it burns through our countermeasures." "That's 10 minutes faster than the simulations suggested," a human tech noted grimly. "These things are smarter than the dormant ones led us to believe." Cax's squad began suiting up in the specialized gear. The human engineers had modified everything perfectly for HFY physiology, another sign of how long they'd been preparing for this. Each suit enhanced their natural climbing abilities while providing protection against the electromagnetic interference that was playing havoc with their fur. "Remember," Reyes said as he checked their equipment, "once you're inside, standard weapons won't do much damage. You'll need to plant the charges exactly where we've marked. The internal structure should be similar to." The briefing was cut short as the Behemoth unleashed a new weapon. A beam of coherent energy sliced through the remaining shields like they were mist, carving a molten groove through 3 Warren complexes. Generations of HFY architectural achievement vaporized in seconds. New attack pattern, Mira's ears flattened against her head as her sensors overloaded. "It's not following any of the documented sequences." Through a gap in the collapsed structures, Cax caught his first close view of their enemy since the initial emergence. The Behemoth's armor plates were shifting, reconfiguring, pieces that had seemed decorative revealing themselves as weapon mounts. Its head, if you could call it that, rotated with precise mechanical grace as it systematically targeted the colony's defensive positions. "All teams, adapt to pattern Echo 9, the human tactical command blared through their comms. "Dropships, maintain dispersal. Do not give it a concentrated target." Cax watched the human response with a mix of awe and professional appreciation. Their dropships moved like a swarm of perfectly coordinated insects, each pilot seeming to know exactly where every other ship would be. When the Behemoth fired, they were already moving, returning fire from multiple angles, keeping the giant machine's attention divided. "That's our window," Reyes pointed to a holographic overlay showing firing angles and blind spots. "Its weapon systems can't track targets directly against its armor. You'll have 3 minutes to reach the first access point before it changes configuration again." Cax turned to his squad, 6 of the Colonial Defense Force's best climbers, all of them trying to ignore their species' instincts screaming at them to dig deep and hide from the massive predator. "Check your charges. Check your suits. Check your suits." Check your courage. Want me to scout ahead? Reyes asked with a completely straight face. Several of Cax's squad actually chirped in amusement, the gallows humor helping to break the tension. I think we can manage, Cax replied dryly. Just keep that thing's attention off us. Oh, don't worry. Reyes' smile was predatory as he signaled her heavy weapons teams. We humans are very good at being annoying when we want to be. As if to demonstrate her point, a barrage of missiles streaked from human defensive positions throughout the colony, detonating against the Behemoth's armor in carefully planned sequences. The ancient machine's head swiveled toward this new threat, its weapons reorienting. Now Reyes commanded, and Cax's squad sprinted from cover. They moved in perfect formation despite their terror, each soldier focused on their training rather than the mountain of living metal they were about to climb. Above them, human ships continued their dance of death with the giant, and Cax allowed himself a moment of hope. Then the Behemoth did something unexpected, something that wasn't in any of the human briefings or simulations. It spoke. The sound wasn't language, at least not any language Cax's translator could process. It was a complex series of harmonics that made his bones vibrate and his fur stand on end. And somehow, impossibly, he understood its meaning. Unauthorized burrowing species detected. Initiating ecological correction protocol. Cax's blood ran cold. This wasn't random. The Behemoth wasn't just attacking their colony, it was targeting their entire species. He looked back at the human command post. Reyes was already on his comm, probably warning command about this new development. But there was no time to wait for new orders. The access point was ahead of them, and they had a job to do. Forward, he chittered to his squad. Let's show both humans and machines what HF warriors can really do. They reached the Behemoth's foot as another energy beam carved through their ancestral tunnels above them. Now came the hard part. Now came the hard part. Now came the climb. The first 50 meters of the climb revealed why humans had never attempted this themselves. The Behemoth's surface was a maze of shifting plates and sudden energy discharges, with maintenance access points barely large enough for a HF to squeeze through. Cax led his squad up the ancient machine's leg, their sensitive pads detecting safe paths that no mechanical scanner could reliably map. Intact, 12 meters up, Mira chittered from just behind him. Energy signature consistent with defense drones. As if summoned by her warning, small machines began emerging from nearly invisible ports in the Behemoth's armor. Each was roughly the size of a human torso, bristling with ancient but clearly lethal weaponry. Maintain course, Cax ordered, even as his fur tried to stand on end inside his suit. Let our allies handle this part. Right on cue, precision fire from the human dropships picked off the nearest drones. Reyes' voice came through their comms. We've got you covered, but don't slow down. These things replicate faster than we can destroy them. The squad continued their ascent, moving with the natural agility that had once made their ancestors the apex climbers of their homeworld. Their modified gear enhanced these abilities, further magnetic grapples extending from their suits to secure holds in the metal surface, sensor pads in their gloves warning of dangerous power fluctuations. Another drone burst from the wall directly in Cax's path. Before it could bring its weapons to bear, one of the human dropships executed a maneuver that should have been impossible for something that size rolling within meters of the Behemoth's surface to deliver a point-blank shot. The drone disappeared in a shower of ancient components. Impressive, Cax muttered, not realizing his comm was open. Thanks, came the pilot's voice, tight with concentration. Just don't tell anyone you saw a Thunderhawk pull a barrel roll that close to target. Pretty sure that's against about 6 different safety protocols. A violent shudder ran through the Behemoth's frame. The giant was reconfiguring again, its armor plates shifting like scales on some massive mechanical serpent. Cax's squad clung to their holds as the surface beneath them rippled. New energy spike, Mira called out. Massive power surge building in the central core. The Behemoth's voice boomed out again, those impossible harmonics making Cax's teeth vibrate, initiating burrower extinction protocol, releasing subterranean purge units. Through his contact with the machine's surface, Cax felt something massive moving deep within the Behemoth. Then, the ground around the colony began erupting as smaller machines, each still the size of a small building, clawed their way to the surface. Coordinator units, Reyes' voice was tight. Just like Mars. They're going to try to seal your tunnel networks, trap your people underground. Commander Velanax broke in all colonial forces. Fall back to emergency positions. Protect the evacuation routes at all costs. Cax watched in horror as the coordinator units began methodically targeting the colony's main burrow entrances, using weaponry designed to melt rock into impassable slag. Centuries of HEF engineering and architecture were being systematically erased. Keep climbing, he ordered his squad, forcing his voice steady. We can't help them from down here. They were approaching their first objective, a maintenance access port that, according to human analysis of dormant behemoths, should connect to secondary power distribution nodes. The port was barely visible, just a slight seam in the ancient metal. Detecting internal defenses, Mira reported, her sensors probing the opening. But something's wrong. These readings don't match anything in the human database. Cax felt it too, a subtle vibration pattern that set his whiskers twitching. The ones humans found were dormant for millennia. This one's been active recently, within the last few hundred years at most. What? Reyes's voice sharpened. That's impossible. We've been monitoring this region for decades. There's no way we would have missed. Your monitoring was surface level, Cax replied, his pads detecting more subtle variations in the metal's resonance. This thing has been moving through deep rock layers, using the planet's core for power. Our ancestors. He paused, a chilling thought striking him. Our ancestors' burrowing colonies must have finally dug deep enough to trigger it. The implications hung in the air. How many more behemoths might be down there, sleeping until HEF expansion triggered their ancient protocols? A massive explosion rocked the colony as the human forces engaged the coordinator units. Through gaps in the chaos, Cax could see human Titan-class siege platforms deploying, their weapons specifically designed to counter these mechanical threats. The humans had prepared for everything except the possibility that the behemoths had prepared for them too. First charge placement in 30 seconds, Mira announced, already prepping the specialized explosives the humans had provided. If their analysis is correct, this should disrupt the power flow to its upper weapon systems. Cax watched the battle raging around them, human ingenuity and determination against ancient, implacable machinery. Both sides impossibly advanced in their own ways, both seeing his people as something to either protect or purge. But right now, only one side was fighting to save his colony. Plant the charge, he ordered. Let's show these machines that the burrowing species they dismissed millennia ago has some new allies. Very, very dangerous allies. Inside his helmet, Cax allowed himself a grim smile. The behemoth was about to learn that looking down on smaller species, whether as threats to be eliminated or pets to be protected, was a very serious mistake. The first charge detonated with a surprisingly soft thump, more felt through the behemoth's frame than heard. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then entire sections of the giant's upper weapon arrays went dark, their energy signatures fading. Direct hit on the power distribution node, Mira confirmed, her sensors picking up the cascading failures. But her whiskers twitched nervously. Something's wrong. The shutdown sequence is too orderly. Cax felt it too. The machine wasn't reeling from damage. It was adapting. All units move. Away from the access port. His squad barely cleared the area before new armor plates slammed into place, nearly crushing two of his soldiers. The behemoth's voice resonated through its frame. Repair protocols analyzed. Countermeasures engaged. Implementing anti-infiltration response. The surface beneath them began to heat rapidly. Their suit's cooling system strained as the temperature rose, and Cax could feel the metal becoming dangerously smooth under his pads. It's trying to flush us off, he called out. Magnetic grapples to maximum. Below, the battle between human forces and coordinator units reached new intensity. The Titan-class siege platforms were holding their own, but more of the smaller machines kept emerging from the ground. Each one seemed specifically designed to target HEF infrastructure, using weapons that could collapse tunnel networks with terrifying precision. Cax Reyes's voice cut through the chaos. We've got a new problem. Our sensors are picking up some kind of signal being broadcast from that thing. It's going deep, way down into the planet's crust. It's calling for reinforcements, Mira realized, her sensors confirming the data. There are more of them down there, many more. The behemoth's armor shifted again, and Cax watched in horror as what they'd thought were decorative elements began transforming into new weapon mounts. The human dropships adapted their attack patterns instantly, but several took heavy hits from weapons they'd never encountered before. Second target is 300 meters up, Cax announced, forcing himself to focus on the mission. If we can reach the main processing core. A violent tremor ran through the machine as something launched from its shoulder array. Not a weapon, some kind of massive probe that plunged into the ground near the colony's deepest warrens. Seismic activity spreading through all tunnel networks. Commander Nax's voice was tight with controlled panic. It's mapped our entire subterranean infrastructure. Surface teams report multiple emergence signatures. We have more behemoths incoming. Cax's squad exchanged looks of pure terror. Their species' instincts were screaming at them to run, to dig, to hide, but those very survival traits were what these machines had been designed to counter. Keep climbing, Cax ordered, his voice steady despite his fear. The humans have a plan. They always have a plan. As if to confirm his words, new ships began dropping out of orbit, massive human vessels, unlike anything he'd seen before. They took up positions around the colony, deploying equipment that made his fur stand on end, even through his suit's shielding. Gravity manipulation platforms, Reyes explained, pride evident in his voice. Special delivery from Earth Command. These things want to break out of the ground? Let's see how they handle having their own mass used against them. The effect was immediate and spectacular. As a second behemoth began to rise from the Earth, crushing one of Colony Deepreach's main agricultural domes, the human platforms activated. The ancient machine's emergence slowed, then stopped, its massive frame groaning as artificially enhanced gravitational forces fought against its motors. Multiple direct hits on coordinator units, a human tactical officer reported. Their armor can't compensate for the gravity fluctuations. Structural failures detected. Cax's squad used the distraction to continue their climb. The behemoth was still trying to shake them off, but their suit's magnetic systems held firm. More importantly, Cax noticed something through his pad's subtle vibrations that felt almost like. It's afraid, he chittered in astonishment. The machine, it's experiencing something like fear. Confirmed, Mira added, her sensors picking up erratic power fluctuations. Its responses are becoming less calculated, more reactive. The humans are making it doubt its protocols. The behemoth's voice boomed again, but this time there was a new harmonic in its mechanical tones. Alert. Human resistance exceeds historical parameters. Species advancement beyond projected models. Recalculating extinction protocols. Yeah, that's right, Reyes's voice carried fierce satisfaction. We've had a long time to think about how to deal with you oversized scrap heaps. And we're just getting started. Another coordinator unit erupted from the ground, but this time 3 human gravity platforms caught it mid-emergence. The machine writhed as conflicting gravitational forces tore at its frame, ancient armor plating buckling and shattering. Second target in sight, Cax reported, spotting the access port they needed. This one was larger, clearly designed for major maintenance drones, but the internal defenses will be stronger here. We'll need covering fire. Oh, I think we can arrange that, Reyes replied. All units, Operation Thunderstrike is go. Show our friends what happens when you mess with their colony. The sky lit up as every human ship and platform opened fire simultaneously, their attacks synchronized to overwhelm the behemoth's defenses. Under cover of this barrage, Cax's squad reached the access port. The metal under his pads thrummed with power and something that felt increasingly like panic. Ready the primary charge, he ordered, watching as human gravity weapons tore apart another emerging coordinator unit. Let's give this ancient nightmare something new to calculate. His team began planting the specialized explosives, while below them, the battle for Colony Deepreach continued to rage. But for the first time since the behemoth rose from the ground, Cax felt something new in his chest, replacing his earlier terror. Hope. The access port was almost big enough for a human to squeeze through, which meant it was practically cavernous by Hef standards. As Cax led his squad inside, their helmet lights illuminated a space that defied easy comprehension. By the deep warrens, Mira breathed, her sensors struggling to process the environment. The internal architecture, it's not mechanical, it's grown. She was right. The corridors inside the behemoth weren't built or assembled, they were more like veins in some vast technological organism. Surfaces that appeared metallic at first glance revealed themselves to be crystalline structures interwoven with what looked disturbingly like circuitry. Reyes, Cax subvocalized into his comm. Are you seeing this? Crystal clear through your feeds, he responded. This matches what we found in the dormant ones, but seeing it active. The technology is beyond anything we've encountered, almost like it's alive. A tremor ran through the structure as another human gravity attack struck the behemoth's outer shell. Here, inside the machine, Cax could feel how the impact rippled through systems that seemed to flex and adapt rather than simply resist. Movement ahead, one of his squad reported. Internal defense units. The maintenance drones inside were nothing like their external counterparts. These were smaller, more elegant, almost beautiful in their complexity. They flowed through the crystalline corridors like mercury, their forms shifting to adapt to the space around them. Hold position, Cax ordered as his squad took cover. Let's see how they react. The drones paused, scanning the HEF soldiers with sensors that hummed at frequencies that made Cax's fur try to stand on end inside his suit. Then, surprisingly, they retreated. They're not attacking, Mira observed, her own sensors working overtime. These internal units, they're not weapons. They're more like maintenance staff. They don't recognize us as a threat because we're too small. The behemoth's arrogance works in our favor, Cax realized. Everything in here is scaled for threats the size of the machine itself. We're like bacteria to it. Bacteria with antimatter charges, one of his squad added with grim humor. They pressed deeper into the behemoth's core, following the path human analysts had mapped out from studying dormant units. The further they went, the more alien their surroundings became. The corridors pulsed with energy that seemed to flow like blood through translucent crystalline veins. Primary core access ahead, Mira announced. But these readings, they don't match anything in the human database. The power signatures are orders of magnitude higher. The chamber they entered was vast by HEF standards, though it would have been cramped for a human. At its center, a column of pure energy rose through what looked like a forest of crystal spires. Each spire hummed with frequencies that set their fur on edge even through their suit's shielding. Reyes, Cax called. We're at the target, but something's different. This isn't just a power core, it's processing data, massive amounts of it. Confirmed, Mira added, her sensors painting complex patterns across their helmet displays. The crystal structures, they're not just power conduits, they're quantum computing nodes. This thing isn't just a weapon, it's a distributed intelligence. As if triggered by their presence, the behemoth's voice resonated through the chamber, but this time it was different, more focused, more direct. Query, why do the humans protect the burrowers? The question caught them off guard. Cax found himself responding before he could think better of it, because they're better than you. They don't destroy what they don't understand. Incorrect. Humans destroy frequently. Historical records confirm this. Yet they defend your species despite no evolutionary advantage in doing so. The crystal spires pulsed faster, and Cax realized the machine was genuinely trying to understand. For all its ancient power, this was something beyond its protocols. That's what makes them dangerous, Cax replied, signaling his squad to begin planting charges while he kept the machine distracted. They choose to be better than their instincts, something you're programmed to never understand. Outside, the battle continued to rage. Through their comms, they could hear the humans systematically destroying coordinator units, using gravity weapons to trap and dismantle the ancient machines with cold efficiency. Humans were classified as primitive. When this unit was sealed, the behemoth continued. Their advancement rate exceeds all projected models. They should not be capable of this level of resistance. Yeah, they get that a lot, Cax said, watching as his squad positioned the final charges. Here's another calculation for you: what happens when humans decide to protect something. Before the machine could respond, Reyes's voice cut through their comms. All units, clear the area. Multiple behemoth signatures breaching containment. Gravity platforms at critical power. Through his contact with the machine's systems, Cax felt the surge of triumph as more of its kind began to rise from the deep. But he also felt something else, a subtle vibration through the crystal forest that reminded him of laughter. Charges set, Mira reported. But sir, conventional detonation won't be enough. These power levels. Cax studied the crystal spires, an idea forming. Reyes, what happens if we use the gravity platforms to implode this chamber while the antimatter charges detonate? There was a pause before she responded, and he could practically hear her fierce grin. We'd create a cascade failure through its entire crystalline network, like shattering a window and watching the cracks spread, but you'd never get clear in time. Feudal, the behemoth's voice boomed. Your species is scheduled for extinction. These actions merely delay the inevitable. No, Cax replied, entering commands into his suit's systems. They prove why humanity was right to ally with us. Sometimes the smallest species can change everything. He turned to his squad. Clear the chamber. Get back to the access port. I'll trigger the sequence. Mira began to protest. That's an order, Lieutenant. The humans gave us a chance to save our colony. Let's make it count. As his squad retreated, Cax began linking the charge's detonation sequences to his suit's power core. Above, through layers of ancient living metal, he could feel more behemoths rising to join the battle. But he could also feel something else, fear spreading through the machine's crystalline nervous system as it finally began to understand what humans were capable of. And what the species they chose to protect could do. Get those gravity platforms realigned, Reyes's voice cut through the chaos as Cax's squad emerged from the behemoth. Target coordinates incoming. All ships clear the kill zone. Squad is clear, Mira reported, her voice tight with emotion. Combat specialist Cax is still inside. He's what Reyes demanded. Inside the crystalline chamber, Cax worked quickly, using his natural sensitivity to the machine's vibrations to place the final overrides. The behemoth's consciousness pressed against his awareness, its voice resonating through the forest of quantum computing spires. Your actions are illogical. Survival probability 0%. You still don't understand, Cax replied, feeling the crystal structures pulse around him. Through the behemoth's own systems, he could sense its brethren rising from the depths, their ancient forms breaking through the planet's crust. This isn't about survival. It's about proof. Clarify. Above, the human gravity platforms moved into their final positions. Cax could feel their power building, creating overlapping fields that would turn the very forces holding the behemoth together into weapons against it. Your kind marked us for extinction because we're burrowers, because we're small, because we didn't fit your parameters for acceptable species development. Cax's paws flew over the makeshift detonation controls he'd wired into his suit. But humanity looked at us and saw something else. They saw allies worth protecting, worth dying for. The crystal spires hummed faster as the machine processed this. Humans are irrational. Their protection of inferior species is exactly why they've surpassed you, Cax interrupted. They don't measure worth by size or strength. They judge by actions, by courage, by the willingness to stand against impossible odds. Through his suit's communications, he could hear the battle raging outside. Human ships and gravity platforms engaging multiple behemoths now, fighting with desperate intensity to buy him time. To protect a colony of aliens they could have easily dismissed as insignificant. Cax Reyes's voice broke through. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. We can't hold them all back. The chamber's crystals pulsed with new energy as the behemoth diverted power to its weapons, preparing to join its awakened brethren in the battle above. Cax felt the machine's confidence returning as it calculated the overwhelming odds in its favor. Extinction protocols will proceed, it declared. Your species will. No, Cax said simply, making the final connections in his suit's power core. We won't. Because humanity taught us something your kind never understood: size doesn't determine destiny. He opened a channel to all frequencies, both human and HF gravity platforms. On my mark. Everyone else. It's been an honor. Wait, Reyes's voice cut through. There's another way. There's always another way. Cax chittered softly, a sound of amused affection. That's such a human thing to say. Always trying to save everyone. He paused. Thank you, by the way, not for trying to save us, for teaching us to save ourselves. Before anyone could respond, he triggered the sequence. The antimatter charges detonated just as the gravity platforms reached full power. The crystalline chamber imploded, its quantum structures shattering in a cascade of impossible energies. The behemoth's consciousness screamed in frequencies that shattered every sensor for kilometers. But through its own systems, through the quantum link it shared with its awakening brethren, one last message propagated. Analysis error. Species capability underestimated. Burrower threat level maximum. The chain reaction spread through the ancient machine's neural pathways, each crystalline node amplifying the overload. From the outside, humans and HF alike watched as lines of burning energy erupted from every seam in the behemoth's armor. The machine's destruction triggered something in its rising brethren. Through their quantum link, They experienced its final moments, its realization that it had fatally underestimated both humanity's determination and the HFY's courage. One by one, they began powering down, sinking back into the depths from which they'd emerged. Hours later, after the gravity platforms had confirmed no more behemoth signatures, Reyes stood with Commander Vela Nax in the ruins of Colony Deepreach's central warren. Around them, human engineering crews were already helping HFY workers shore up damaged tunnels. He knew, didn't he? Reyes asked quietly. He knew the quantum backwash would affect the others. Make them reassess. Yes, Nax replied, her whiskers drooping with grief and pride. He knew they'd feel one of their own die by the hand of a mere burrower. Knew it would force them to recalculate everything they thought they knew about our species. And about humanity's choice to ally with you. That too. Nax watched as a human Titan-class platform gently lifted a fallen dome segment, allowing HFY engineers to repair the warren beneath. Your people could have dismissed us as easily as the behemoths did, could have treated us as pets or pests. Instead, we recognized fellow survivors. Reyes finished. Fellow fighters. In the distance, sensor crews reported the behemoth signals continuing to fade, moving deeper underground, running not from humanity's weapons, but from the realization that their protocols had been fundamentally wrong. That sometimes the smallest creatures could demonstrate the greatest strength. What happens now? Reyes asked. Commander Nax straightened to her full height, barely reaching Reyes's waist, but somehow no less dignified for it. Now we rebuild. Better than before. And we remember what combat specialist Cax proved today. Which is that true respect isn't about size or strength. It's about the size of one's courage. The strength of one's convictions. She turned to watch the sun setting over her damaged but enduring colony, and the wisdom to recognize allies not for what they look like, but for what they choose to be. Above them, human ships continue their patrol, standing guard over the colony of beings so physically unlike themselves, ready to fight any threat, no matter how ancient or massive, to protect not just allies, but friends. And deep underground, in tunnels older than recorded history, ancient machines began rewriting protocols that had guided them for millennia. Sometimes, they were learning, the smallest changes had the biggest effects. Just ask the humans. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.